Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
Welcome to Merryn Talks Your Money, the personal finance edition of Merryn Talks Money. In these bonus podcasts, we talk about the best strategies for making the most of your money. I'm Merryn Somerset Webb, and with me, senior reporter and money distilled author John Stepek. Hi, John.
Hi, Merryn.
John, I'm enjoying making these episodes. I realized that actually, you and I, we started in personal finance, right? This is our natural home, talking about ISAs and mortgages and savings and all that kind of thing. We rather like it, and we're getting lots of interesting questions from people. So we know what people really want to hear about, and maybe it's just ISAs and more ISAs.
ISAs seem to be important.
Yeah. Right. This week we are answering, yes, an ISA question from Jack. Now, it's quite long, and I'm not going to read the whole thing out, but the gist of it is this. Jack is in his late 20s. He's been putting the maximum allowances into a stocks and shares lifetime ISA each year since it started in 2017. We're going to explain exactly what a lifetime ISA is in a moment, so don't turn off now because you don't know. He's been doing it with the intention that it would help him buy his first home. That hasn't worked out quite as he expected. He is still renting in London, and now he's wondering whether the lifetime ISA really makes sense for him as the primary way for him to save for a house. Now, his final question is, do you think it's worth continuing to put money in or not? So first things first, a lifetime ISA. Do you want to explain a lifetime ISA, John, or shall I explain a lifetime ISA?
Basically, you can get one if you're 18 and under 40. You put up to $4,000 a year in it, and the government will, they describe it as a 25% bonus, but what they're doing is giving you your basic rate tax back. So if you put in £4,000, that gets topped up to $5,000. Now, the tricky thing here is there's basically two purposes to a lifetime ISA. You can either take the money out to pay the deposit on your first house, which is what Jack is thinking about doing. But the problem there for anyone living in London is that the house can be worth no more than £450,000. The other thing you can do with it is you can leave it until you're 60, and then you can take the money out and you don't pay any income tax or capital gains tax or anything, same as with a traditional ISA. If at any point before that you take the money out, you have to give back the basic rate tax relief, plus the government takes a 6.25% penalty on top. That's it. That's what a lifetime ISA is. It's a slightly complicated hybrid product, which may not necessarily end up satisfying anyone, but we can talk about that.
And you have to be careful about it, by the way, because the way John has just explained it is excellent. If you read about it on any of the websites, or indeed on the government website, it will say, when you put money in, you get a 25% bonus. Hurrah! If you take it early or anything like that, a 25% charge will apply, leaving you possibly believing that the cash that goes in and the cash that comes out as a penalty is the same, which it absolutely isn't. And if you scroll down on the government website, you can see them giving a little example of how this works. So, assuming no growth, initial savings of £800 will earn a 25% government bonus of £200 and give you a pot of £1,000. If you wish to withdraw the entire pot, a 25% charge will apply to the full £1,000. See what they've done there? You think it's the same, don't you? You're wrong. You'll have to pay a government withdrawal charge of £250. This will leave you with £750, so less than you put in. And therein lies a large part of the problem with this product. One more thing John doesn't say that I'm going to add in. There are 3 reasons you can withdraw it. If you're buying your first home, under £450,000, of course. If you are 60 or over, that's quite important. Keep that number 60 in your head. Or if you are terminally ill and have only 12 months to live and can somehow prove that you have only 12 months to live, then they will give it back to you. So here we come to the question. You're putting money in, you're putting in your £4,000 a year, you're getting your £1,000 back from the government, it's building up. Our questioner, Jack, has been doing it how many years did he say? 7 years? So maybe he's got with a little, yeah. So maybe if he's got a little bit of growth, maybe he's got £40,000 in there now, right?
Yeah.
Not much when you're thinking about buying a house in London, for starters. And if he's thinking of buying over £450,000, which sounds like he is it worth continuing to pay? My answer is no, my instinctive answer. Before we get into the details, what's your instinctive answer, John?
I sympathise here because £450,000 is going to sound like nuts to anyone who's listening to this outside of the South East. But the average first-time buyer home in London, according to Hamptons, sold for £447,000 actually this year. That's the average first-time buyer home. The average house is closer to like over $500,000. So it's a genuine restriction, and it's also a totally arbitrary one. So I don't actually even understand why there's an upper limit on the price of the house that you can buy with this, because there's a contribution limit. The money's there, so why does it matter exactly what price of house you're buying for it?
Well, but I can tell you exactly why, because it would look terrible in the Daily Mail or anything like that if someone bought a £2 million house using a lifetime ISA. They'd be like, that's terrible press. That's a bad look. But of course, this is also a terrible look. There are so many different products available to help people buy their first home from, well, not anymore, but Help to Buy and all this kind of thing. I never understood why the lifetime ISA was introduced in the first place. Now, we should say that if you're outside London, first-time buyer prices are much lower. I've actually got numbers. What numbers were you using?
Well, I used Hamptons, but Zoopla was similar.
Yeah, no, and the ones I'm looking at, they're all broadly similar. So
Yeah.
the average price of a home across the UK is well under £300,000, 260 something, depending on where you are. And if you buy somewhere very cheap, Liverpool, County Durham, apparently very cheap. I mean, £150,000 average first-time buyer. So, there are places where this makes sense, where it really does make sense.
You're right. It's if you can't use the lifetime ISA to buy a house, then the kind of purpose of it is gone. I mean, I do remember when it was introduced, there was a sense that, and I remember writing about this at the time, that perhaps George Osborne was hoping to move the whole pension system over into ISAs in some way.
Oh God, I remember that.
Yeah,
I'd forgotten about that.
but obviously that came before Brexit, and then everything changed, and it wasn't an Osborne
They forgot about everything.
chancellorship anymore. But I think that was it, and so it's like kind of like a stalled long-term effort to shift the entire pension structure in some way.
Okay, well, let's look at it from that point of view then. So let's say that Jack is never going to buy a property that costs under £450,000. Let's also say that the government is never going to put up that cap. I mean, it feels very unlikely that would happen at the moment. The conversation is all about reducing caps on everything, reducing the amount you can put in an ISA, reducing the amount you can have an ISA over a lifetime, reducing the amount you can have in a pension, etc., etc. That's the conversation. So it seems very unlikely that this government is suddenly going to turn around and say, lifetime ISA, I don't know, let's make that $1 million.
Yeah.
Just not going to happen, is it?
The only thing I would say is I wouldn't take any action until after October the 30th, because the one area is that this is related to housing and it's related to first-time buyers. So the one thing I can, there's an outside chance that maybe Rachel Reeves and whatever kind of like potential wheeze they come up with for reducing the housing market, if they do, could maybe be connected to the lifetime ISA. So I wouldn't take all my money out or panic or anything like that until after the budget.
No one's going to rush and take their money out. No one's suggesting that, John. Just about whether you should put any more in.
True.
So if you've got it in already, you don't want to take it out, right? You don't want to take it out because you'll have to pay that penalty. So you don't want to do that. So you're going to leave it in, right? If you're not going to take it out to buy a first home, then it stays in until you're either about to die or you're age 60. So some people might say, well, it's a perfectly good pension backup, right? Why not put a little money in there as well as in your pension, because it's basically the same. You'd get back your 20%, right, if you're a lower rate taxpayer. If you're a higher rate taxpayer, obviously it makes no sense. You should put money into your pension instead. But if you're a low rate taxpayer, does it work to keep contributing? I would say, well, it's much of a muchness, but it comes with this difficult bit, which is that you can't take it out until you're over 60. And at least with your actual pension, you can take it out. What is it now? It's going to be 57, isn't it? It may go up. Maybe it'll end up at 60 as well. I don't know. That could easily be one of the things that comes out from this budget or another budget, that the current rate at which you can take a private pension is too low. But nonetheless, that's the difference.
That makes sense. I mean, you can see the kind of private pension age may go up until it's 60 at some point as well. But it'll take them a wee while to get there, you would think, at the current pace.
So basically, it seems like the upshot, the answer to this question is probably don't take it out, probably don't put any more in, and max out your pension instead if you can. Would that make sense, John?
I think that makes sense. I mean, I suppose the only irritation for poor Jack is that this is where he'd stuck his housing deposit. If he's built up near enough 40 or 45 grand in there, it's kind of like, well, actually, how are you going to square that circle? Because if you don't have a housing deposit built up somewhere else, then, that's the only money that you're going to be able to use for it. And I think that then becomes a somewhat trickier question.
Oh God, John, I hadn't thought of that. Poor Jack.
I know, I feel a bit sorry for him. I'm thinking, right, well, so what is he going to do? Because if this was your source of savings for your house, but you can't, the only thing I can think of, and this is like, not that helpful, is you need to try and find somewhere that's like under 450 grand. That's...
Jack is going to have to move to Liverpool.
Nice place. I'm getting very fond of it.
I hope you've got a working from home deal in your contract, Jack.
See, another great problem solved.
Another great problem solved. Is Jack allowed to buy a country cottage with it?
Oh, yeah, as long as it's under 450 grand.
Yeah, so he doesn't actually, does he have to live in it? If he buys a house with his lifetime ISA, does he have to live in the house? Or can he buy it elsewhere and rent it out?
Oh, no.
You have to live in it.
Yeah, you have to live in it, and you have to have a standard repayment mortgage.
You also can't use it if you're borrowing money from a parent.
Yeah.
Or another relation.
Yeah.
Or someone you're in a civil partnership with. Or your spouse. Or any relatives of your spouse or civil partner. Quite limited, isn't it?
Yeah, and you can't use it on a shared ownership property either. You could, as long as the property is worth less than 450,000. Not that I would recommend getting into that anyway, because all sorts of other issues. But yeah, so, it is actually quite restrictive on people living in London, which actually does seem unfair.
Do you know, I would say that George Osborne owes Jack an apology.
Yeah.
And maybe the rest of us for various other things, but we'll come to that later. Another podcast. Right. Anything to add to that?
No, I think we've kind of thoroughly done that one.
Okay. And apologies, Jack, for not being
sorry.
able to come up with an actual solution to your problem, assuming that is where you have been saving your deposit money and you have no other deposit money, and why would you? So our apologies to you for George Osborne's terrible policy. Thank you for listening to this week's Merryn Talks Your Money. If you like our show, rate, review and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And keep sending questions or comments to merrynmoney@bloomberg.net, as many as possible, and as many as you like on ISAs. John and I are very interested in ISAs. You can also follow me and John on Twitter or X. I'm MerrynSW and John is John_Stefek. This episode was produced by Samir Sadi and Isabella Ward, production support and sound design by Moses and